Hey, it's you, man, from KC95 here. Good evening and welcome to Toasted Tavern. Your host, Scott Tobin, and the man called Wags are ready to bring you the night in sports. So pull up a stool, grab a drink, and let's get toasted.
Good evening. Welcome into the Toasted Tavern. Michael Wang Connect alongside Scott Tobin here on Father's Day to bring you all the latest in Midwestern sports. And it was an absolutely beautiful day outside to celebrate with the family and to celebrate the fathers in your life. It was probably one of the more perfect days we've had here in the last couple of weeks. There was no rain. That was the best part of it right there. But yeah, Scott, I mean, how has your day been today? And how have you been able to enjoy the weekend?
Yeah, it's been a beautiful weekend, man. Now, like you said, we had rain Friday night, but the last 2 days it's been rain free and the temperatures have been nice. And we've seen the sun. Perfect weekend for people to get out and enjoy some time with their families and barbecue and do all of those things. And happy Father's Day to all the dads out there, definitely. But yeah, good weekend, man. Just kind of relaxing, trying to get rejuvenated after a long week at the ballpark last week and everything else that was going on. So just trying to kind of reset the battery and get ready to go into another fun week.
Yeah, there's still plenty of stuff going on across the state, across really across sports in general. I mean, last week we talked about the XFL conference championship game leading into the UFL championship, which unfortunately the Battlehawks did lose and were not able to participate in that one. Obviously, we've got the Cardinals going right now. They are out on a bit of a mini road trip, 6-game road trip, or 7-game road trip. Apologies, because they played 4 in Milwaukee, but lots of stuff still going on. We've got NFL training camps and all that getting kind of underway soon. We've got NHL training camp is still a few ways away because we got a Stanley Cup to wrap up, which may actually wrap up here in the next couple of days because Florida has continued to just pounce and pounce and pounce despite being only up 3-2. Lots of stuff going on and a lot of stuff going on here in the state of Missouri. And the big impetus of the show tonight was to talk about the passing of Senate Bill 3 because it has a lot of implications for local sports programs. But about 45 minutes before we came on, a bombshell of a trade dropped in Major League Baseball well ahead of the trade deadline. We talked last week about coming up with our kind of dream trade scenarios for the Cardinals. Well, the Boston Red Sox and the San Francisco Giants kind of got things going pretty early here in the summer by making a deal for, Rafael Devers going from Boston to San Francisco. That one, when it hit my phone, I looked at it and I was shocked not only that the trade happened, but the return that the Giants were giving to the Red Sox in this deal. And you and I were talking about before we came on the show. It is a big shock what's going both ways, essentially.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, we knew things in Boston weren't going well. Devers had wanted out, since spring training, basically, when they asked him to give up third base. And he said he wasn't going to play first base and he didn't want a DH and he was a third baseman. And, that couldn't really happen because the Red Sox had invested a lot of money in a free agent third baseman, which you would have thought they would have talked to their third baseman that they just signed a 10-year, $300 million plus contract with about bringing in another third baseman before they made that move, but obviously they didn't. And things haven't gone well in Boston between Devers and the Red Sox organization. So this trade sounds like a trade that it was just Boston decided that they couldn't take it anymore. I guess things were so broken between them and Devers that they needed to ship him out of town. And that's what happened, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, he was in the second year of his 10-year deal that was going to pay him over $313 million. So, they wanted to, I guess, to get out of that contract and not have to deal with another 7.5 years of a guy not changing a position or being willing to, change a position. It just felt like, the harm was done when, they brought in Bregman and moved him to DH and then asked him to move to first base when Casas went down and he said no. And just so much bad blood between Devers and the Red Sox that he was going to get dealt at some point this year. I feel like you knew that was going to happen, but I think a lot of us thought it was going to be closer to the deadline and you would have a couple teams potentially bidding for his services and those packages coming back were going to be pretty significant, something that could help the Red Sox going forward. Looking at the return that they're getting in this deal, it's former Cardinal Jordan Hicks was the one that it's kind of wrapped around. Like, he was the name that popped up on the alert that was Devers for Hicks and more. And you're like, wait a second, this is interesting, because Hicks is 1-5 this year with a 6.47 ERA. And the other guy going back in the trade is Kyle Harrison, who was supposed to be the starter tonight for San Francisco. He obviously didn't start that game, and he's got a sub just under a 5 ERA this year. And that's really about it. I mean, there's a couple other pieces. The other part is the Giants are taking on the remainder of the contract. They are not, Boston's not having to pay any more of Devers' contract. So that's a big part of it as well. But the fact that the Red Sox didn't get just a little bit more is a bit surprising.
It is. And imagine being a Red Sox fan right now. Think about the last, let's say, 5 years you're a Boston Red Sox fan. Let's go back to the Mookie trade. Remember when Mookie wasn't happy in Boston and the Red Sox traded him to the Dodgers and basically got nothing? Alex Verdugo was the big piece of that came back, that he lasted in Boston for 2 years, and then he was a Yankee. And nothing really came of that. And Red Sox fans were upset about that. So when that happened, the next star of the Red Sox was supposed to be Xander Bogaerts. Okay. So Xander Bogaerts has a couple of really good years, and you're like, okay, yeah, we're going to sign him to a big, long contract. Oh, wait, no, we're not. We're going to let him leave in free agency, and Rafael Devers is going to be the face of the franchise. Okay, Rafael Devers, one of the best hitters in the American League. Okay, we signed him to a 10-year, $300 million plus year deal. Okay, great. He has a good year. Free agency comes around last year. Hey, you know what? Alex Bregman's out there. Maybe we should do that. Why would you do that when you have Rafael Devers? And why would you not talk to Rafael Devers about the possibility of bringing in Alex Bregman? And not only were you talking about Alex Bregman, you were also talking about bringing in Nolan Arenado. Mm-hmm. So they obviously wanted to move Devers off third base without talking to him about it, which obviously upset him very much. He said, no, I'm not doing it. They said, okay, you're going to be your DH. No, I'm not going to do that. Okay, then you're going to play first base. No, I'm not going to do that. So, I mean, it just created a huge problem. So now if you're a Red Sox fan, you get to the middle of June and you trade him and you get Jordan Hicks back, who, I mean, let's be honest, Jordan Hicks has had, a half of a good year in his entire career, basically. He had one half of a season as a Cardinal closer before he got hurt. And then he had half of a season last year when he first signed that deal with the Giants, when they gave him a huge contract and said, oh, you're going to be a starter. And he started out like 4-1. And then he came to St. Louis and pitched against the Cardinals, and they lit him up for like 13 runs. And then he couldn't get anybody out after that. It hasn't been able to for over a year. And so, the Red Sox are like, oh, we got to get rid of this. So we'll take Rafael Devers. And if you're Devers, you can't be happy about this. I mean, yeah, you're happy that you're leaving Boston, but you're going from Fenway Park and the Green Monster to Oracle Park in San Francisco, where right-hand hitters go to die. I mean, no right-handed hitter has ever done anything in that ballpark. I mean, it was built for Barry Bonds, and left-handed power hitters can drive the ball off that big wall and into the bay. But right-handed hitters in San Francisco, power-wise, it's not been a good experience. So, I mean, if you're Devers, you're like, maybe I should have just stayed in Boston, where I might not have been happy, but I was going to put up big numbers. I don't understand this trend in any way, shape, or form.
Well, I was looking it up. Devers actually is left-handed when it comes to batting. He throws right-handed. So he may.
All right, I'm wrong. All right, maybe I'm wrong.
He may. And I was thinking I'll be perfectly honest. I'm looking at his stuff right now. He's been with the Red Sox for 9 years. I didn't realize he had been with the Red Sox for 9 years coming into this season. And I didn't know which side he batted on or anything like that until I started looking it up. So, yeah, I mean, it's crazy to me that this is a guy that is highly lauded. And, yes, he's an American League player, or he was an American League player, but it never hit that he was like one of the big guys in there until just really the last couple of years, right before he signed the big deal and all that stuff. And even this year, he started off really, really slow. He's picked it up. He's batting .271 now, 14 dingers and 57 RBI. But, he's one of those guys that I didn't know that he was in the upper echelon of Major League Baseball players, because it just didn't seem like his name ever came up.
Well, and he was, for a long time he wasn't, because you had, like we said, you had Mookie and you had Bogaerts and you had JD Martinez, and you had all these guys in Boston that were the big names, and he was just a guy. He put up good numbers, but yeah, he was just a part of that team. The last couple of years, he's been kind of the face because some of the other moves, like, I don't know, Trevor Story, haven't exactly worked out for the Red Sox the way they had planned. So, it's an interesting move, and the fact that he throws right-handed is why I was thinking he was a right-handed hitter. I don't know why that didn't dawn on my head. But anyway, maybe he'll do better in San Francisco than I thought. But still, it's going to be a big change from going from Fenway to Oracle Park in San Francisco because, the marine layer of the air at night in San Francisco, the ball doesn't exactly fly out of that ballpark. And so it's going to be a real challenge for him. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens to the Red Sox now because, they were decent this season. I mean, they were hanging in there in the AL East. They weren't in first place or anything, but they weren't having a horrible season. They were kind of middling in contention. Mm-hmm. So where do they go from here now? Do they make some other move to try to bring in a star? Because, the Red Sox fans are not going to be happy in Boston if there's not a superstar in Boston because it's been years. I mean, think about all the stars that they've had in Boston over the years, going back to Big Papi and Manny and Mookie, and there's just been a constant one or two guys every year for years now, and there really isn't one now. So what happens to the Red Sox fans and what happens in Boston is going to be really interesting.
Yeah, they're kind of in that, and it's weird to compare them to the Cardinals in a sense because they're kind of in that mode of trying to figure out their identity for the next couple of years. Do you rebuild? Do you retool? Do you've got in Boston, you've got more. You got more money than the Cardinals do to be able to feed into your payroll. But, we also know that they built a team from within in the past as well. So, I haven't dived deep into their farm system or anything like that. So you look at it and you go, what does their farm system look like? Do they have the ability to maybe bring up some young guys and kind of retool and make some deals? Because like you said, they're middling right now. They're 37-36. They're 6.5 back of first place in the East, but they've still got some talent. I mean, you look at it now, Alex Bregman's going to be the face of that team right now. And is that someone that's going to be there long term? Yes, he signed a contract there, but again, if you go through a rebuild or even a retool, now you look at it and you go, maybe that's leverage that we try to have and deal him to somebody that was looking for a third baseman that we signed, and now we can maybe make something happen. But you look at the return you just got for Devers and you go, as a Red Sox fan, do you trust them to make a deal for him that would get some good return back?
And I'm trying to remember. It seems like Bregman's deal was like a 3-year deal, but I think he might have an opt-out after this season. If I remember correctly, I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think he might.
It's very possible. Let me take a quick look and see if we can find it. Opt-out clause. He has 2 opt-out clauses, actually. It's a 3-year, $120 million contract with opt-out clauses after the first 2 seasons. So he could opt out after this year or next year. And the Red Sox are out everything at that point. So again, does that sit there and make you actively try and move him at the deadline this year, especially if you feel like you're not going to make a run and get into the playoffs? You've already traded one big bat. Do you run the risk of him, walking this year? And now you've basically lost, essentially your corner offensive players.
Well, and the problem they're going to have trading him are those opt-outs because, if you do trade him, a team's not going to give you a whole lot for him because there's no guarantees he's going to stay. You may make a trade for him and he's only there for 2.5 months and then he's like, yep, I'm out. See ya. So, the return on investment there is not going to be really worth it either. So, yeah, the Red Sox have kind of painted themselves in a corner here.
Yeah, they certainly have. And being a Cardinals fan, am I disappointed that Boston is struggling right now? No, not at all. After 2004 and 2013, no, I'm okay. I'm okay if Boston struggles a little bit. So yeah, let's hope that the problems continue there in Boston.
Yeah, I don't mind seeing Boston go through kind of a downturn either. They've had their share of winning the last decade.
That they have. All right, that was the breaking news that came out just a little while ago. We had to touch on that first off. You got anything else on that one before we move on?
No, but it's just going to be interesting to see how it plays out. The one thing I will say, though, it makes you wonder if the trade deadline, I know the trade deadline is still the end of July, but do things start happening sooner now because of the way the schedule is set up? Because you think about it, it used to be the halfway mark of the season was the middle of July, and then the trade deadline was like 2 weeks later. Well, with the season being moved up now, the halfway mark of the season is going to be the middle to end of June because the Cardinals are at 73 games right now. So next week, you're going to be at the halfway point. So then you've still got another 5 weeks till the trade deadline. So, when you make those trades now, they're not going to be as impactful if you wait until the trade deadline because instead of having almost half of a season, you're only going to have a guy for like 45 games. So do we see teams start making bigger trades earlier now because of the fact that you don't get as much impact or bang for your buck if you wait till the trade deadline to make those deals?
I think this deal signifies that. I think it really does. I think you will start to see some other things happen because, looking at it right now and just looking at the Cardinals, and this is not taking into account anybody else that is fighting for a wild card spot or anything like that. The Giants, the Padres, and the Brewers are all up on the Cardinals. Philly sitting up there at the top of the wild card right now. But those three teams, and one of them, the Giants, have made their big move. Now they could make other moves, but now that forces the Padres and the Brewers and essentially the Cardinals and the Reds potentially into, do we essentially pack it in now, or do we start to make those moves as well? And I look at it and I go, I don't know what move the Cardinals especially can make right now because this team was hot for a while. Their hitting was going, their pitching was going. Pitching hasn't been bad. It's been a bit of a rough stretch here for the team as a whole, mainly because of the offense. But do you go out and try to find a shutdown pitcher? Do you go out and try to really find somebody that can boost your offense? I don't know if either of those options are out there for them, or do you just kind of stand pat and maybe wait a little bit longer and see where you're at, and then maybe look at potentially, and I hate to say it now, but potentially sell off some guys. I mean, there's no clear target for this team, and because of that, and because of where things are at now, and the fact that this deadline and this trade time is going to ramp up now, I don't know where the Cardinals are at.
I think we'll have a much clearer idea what the Cardinals do and what they're thinking after the 4th of July weekend, because at that point, you'll have played 7 games against the Cubs. We haven't seen yet this year. After you get through those 2 series, you're going to have a better idea of where you're at standing-wise. Because, who knows? Talk about where they're at right now, but you get hot and sweep them in St. Louis next week, and you're right back in the hunt. So, and then you go to Chicago over 4th of July weekend. If that goes well, you could be in first place. So I think the Cardinals are not doing anything until after that. I think the Cardinals will be that team that probably does, if they make a move, it will be right around the trade deadline because of the fact that, like you said, you want to wait and see what happens. And then, if you get to that point in the trade deadline and you do want to sell some guys off, if you get to, July 31st and you say, okay, we're not going to make the playoffs, all of a sudden you can go, hey, look, we have Eric Fetty, we have Miles Michaelis, we have Sonny Gray, we have Steven Matz, we have, what do you want? Because we have possibly Ryan Helsley, come make your best offer because we're still sitting here with these guys. So I think that's what you'll see the Cardinals do. And if the Cardinals they're not going to make a blockbuster trade to add to this team this year. It doesn't make sense to. It's going to be minor moves that kind of increase things, whether it's another bat to help your bench or a bullpen arm or something along those lines. This isn't the year you're going to go out and go all in for somebody because, for one thing, I don't know that there's going to be anybody to go all in for. But I think they'll be kind of patient and wait it out and see how things go, at least for the next couple of weeks, and then have a better idea of where things go. But it wouldn't surprise me to see a team like the Padres go, oh, man, the Giants just made a move. We need to react and do something. We've seen the Padres make some pretty strange moves, go all in, and it hasn't really paid off for them to this point. So will they do it again this year? It's possible. I don't see Milwaukee really doing a whole lot. I think they're kind of like the Cardinals. I think they're just going to kind of ride this out. They've got some young pitching coming up. We saw one the other night. Mm-hmm. Really, really, really looked good. A Missouri kid shut down the Cardinals the other night. So, they've got some pitching coming up. And I think that's kind of where you're going to see the Cardinals when it comes to really making improvements, I think if the Cardinals pitching struggles, I think that's where you're going to see things happen. I think you're getting closer and closer to the point where Michael McGreevy may show up in the rotation at some point down the road. I think Takao Roby may be getting close. I think those guys all could be coming in the next month or so, potentially. So I think that's kind of what we got to watch and see.
Yeah, there's a lot of question marks around, who could be moving up, who could potentially be moving out. I mean, it's still early, and I think you're right in the fact that if there is going to be a team that kind of panics and tries to make a move, it will be the Padres, just because it's an interdivision team that you're chasing, and you are right there. You're about, you're the last wild card right now. You're a game and a half up on the Brewers, but you're also a game and a half back of the Giants. So you've got about a 3-game swing there, and if they want to hold on to that, they may have to make that move to feel like they can stay in that position. The thing that just drives me absolutely crazy and is the fact that, you've still got the Reds and the Diamondbacks still in that wild card hunt. I mean, the Cardinals and Reds are tied 3 games back of the final spot. The Diamondbacks are 3.5 back. So, 2 teams that I don't know if you'd necessarily say were expected to be a little bit better than they are, but the Reds especially, I mean, looking at them, they've got a plus 41 run differential right now. That's the best of the teams that are chasing the wild card right now. The Brewers are at a plus 21, and honestly, and really, it's better than the Padres they're at just a plus 25 in run differential. So the fact that the Reds are a team that's kind of just hovering right there and waiting to strike is a little interesting, because I don't think anybody expected them to be in this moment, because they are a bit of a younger team and they're kind of punching above their station right now.
Yeah, but some people did think they were going to do a little bit better because of the fact that they brought Terry Francona in to kind of settle things down and take the reins there. So that'll be interesting. But I mean, you can say the same thing about the Cardinals. Cardinals aren't supposed to be any good either, So, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out over the next 6 weeks and see what teams do. But it'll definitely give us something to talk about.
Oh yeah, 100%. There's going to be plenty to talk about. We've got our trade scenarios that we're starting to work up now. That's been accelerated now that that a big deal has been made, because we thought we had at least another couple of weeks before we had to really start thinking, okay, who's going to go where? What would make sense for the Cardinals? What would be some weird trades and all that kind of stuff? Well, that's changed. We have to probably start working on those this week, because by the time next show comes along, somebody might be moved by then.
It's very possible.
And we will get deeper into that as we go on, as it gets deeper into June and into July. So make sure you stick around for that. And we'll talk about the Cardinals a little bit later as well. They were up in Milwaukee, and it didn't go quite as well as we had hoped it would go, although there are some positives to take out of it, even in the losses that the team suffered. They were close games, but we'll talk about that here in just a little bit. But we got to get into kind of the meat of what tonight's show is about, and that is the stadium funding bill that, in a sense, rapidly passed this past week. It was one of those things that it was kind of floundering the last couple of months, really, and the deadline for the Kansas tax breaks was coming up at the end of the month, and they knew that they had to figure this out now to even have a chance of potentially keeping the Royals and Chiefs in the state of Missouri. And this week they worked hard to get this thing passed, and it did pass. It passed the Senate 2 weeks ago, and it passed the House this past week, and was signed by Governor Kehoe. So it is going into effect. The state is now going to be able to help support 50% of any renovations or funding for stadiums being built in the state of Missouri, and that was something that was for the Chiefs and for the Royals. Although if you looked at the bill itself, pretty sure it said in there that the Cardinals are the dominant baseball team and the most popular baseball team in the state of Missouri. So I don't know how much that helps the Royals fans' chances of staying around in Kansas City if that's the case. But you've got a little bit of a more deeper insight into how this kind of has worked and how things could be affected. So let's talk a little bit about this bill and really kind of what it means for the Chiefs and the Royals and their potential for staying in the state of Missouri, and how it affects everybody here on the east side here in St. Louis.
Oh, I mean, it definitely is a huge thing for the possibility of keeping both of these teams. I mean, it definitely, the state can definitely go in and put money in to try to keep them both in Missouri. As we know, Kansas had made a really serious push to try to get them into the state of Kansas. The governor over there is very, very active in trying to make that happen. Although hearing things from certain legislators and different people in the state of Kansas, I've heard them say that they don't really think that Kansas can do what the governor has promised, that the money's not really there. And, they're not really sure that it's the financial windfall that the governor has tried to make it sound like it will be in Kansas. So that's a really interesting thing. I think the biggest thing about this is, and I mean, I'm going to go away from the Royals and the Chiefs real quick. I think it's really interesting the fact that this passed, and I think it's a domino effect, man. I think it goes back to the fact that the last administration had absolutely no interest, as far as the governor, in keeping the Rams in St. Louis. They state was not interested in funding a new stadium, was not interested in trying to help the city of St. Louis keep the Rams in St. Louis. I mean, we know at this point that it didn't really matter what they did,
Right.
but the state really was not interested in funding a new stadium or doing anything financially to help St. Louis keep the Rams here. And so that happened. The Rams moved, and you see what the financial ramifications that had on the city of St. Louis, on the county of St. Louis, and just the state in general. All the businesses in the area that lost money because of the Rams and what that did. And so I think this governor, I think this administration, and even the House and the Senate kind of realized that and looked at this and said, okay, so losing the Rams hurt St. Louis. What will losing the Chiefs and the Royals do to Kansas City and the western part of the state? I mean, that would be a huge loss, not just for the city of Kansas City, but Blue Springs and, Leaf Summit and all of that area around Kansas City, all of those businesses that, people stop at restaurants and hotels and all of those things to do. Because in some ways, I mean, the Royals and the Chiefs, yes, they affect Kansas City, but the fact that they're, 15 miles from downtown Kansas City, some of those businesses and restaurants and hotels on the outskirts of the city and in the county really see more revenue than the city does from them in a lot of ways. So I think the whole area on the western side of the state realized that they had to rally around and try to make this happen. And it's huge for the state of Missouri, because you do not want to lose. In a lot of ways, you don't want to lose the revenue and the taxes and all of the things that come along with those sports teams. Plus, just the ability to say, hey, we have these two major franchises in our state. You don't want to see those go across the river. And at the same time, I can understand all the legislators and all the people that were against it going, okay, that's great for Kansas City, but what does it do for me? I mean, there are people in St. Louis in the county, representatives, House people, Senate people going, okay, what does it do for my district? It doesn't do anything for me. So you can understand why people voted against it too. But in the overall greater scheme of things, I think you don't want to lose out. I don't think you want to lose two sports teams and go, okay, we've lost three sports teams in the state of Missouri in less than a decade. I mean, that just hurts the state financially and just the overall appearance of what the state can do around the country.
Yeah, I think you're right. And the thing that kind of is interesting is, and I don't think it was necessarily, the western side of the state that really pushed to make sure that the Rams didn't get the funding that they needed. It was more so ownership of the Chiefs helping vote allow St. Louis to leave as well. But it does raise the question. It's the same questions that we now have here on the eastern side of why is this helping us when the funding is really for the Kansas City side of things. It's the same thing that was being questioned back then when the western side of the state was like, well, if this is happening to support the city of St. Louis or the Rams, how is that affecting us? And I think some of that is kind of answered in the bill, because it's not just the stadium funding that is a part of this bill. There was language in there about storm relief, and the storm relief for the city of St. Louis and the surrounding counties jumped from 25 million to 100 million in this bill. That was part of the governor's kind of push to help get this bill passed. Was, yes, we're going to try and have it help out, keeping the Chiefs and Royals, but we got to get something here on the eastern side of the state. And they were able to get that put together so that storm relief funds are able to come into this area a lot more than what was originally proposed. So that's kind of the part of helping it. The fact that they've kind of put hard caps on increases as well for counties that don't necessarily directly impact the Kansas City area. So yes, everybody's going to see increases in things that, in their bills, but in a lot of the counties, they're not going to increase by more than 5% per year. So you look at it and you go, okay, yes, this is definitely more so helping, the Kansas City side right now, but it's not totally hamstringing us. And this isn't just a bill that is drafted to say the state is willing to help the Royals and the Chiefs. This is something that the Blues, the Cardinals, they can all tap into as well if that's the case. And yes, there's the argument of, yes, can owners build their own stadiums, renovate their own stadiums because of the amount of money they make? Yes, that is a wholly separate conversation. But for what this is, everybody can get in on the piece of the pie. The Cardinals, the Blues, probably the Battlehawks. I mean, anybody that has a sports franchise here, they are able to tap into that. So it's not just a bill for Kansas City. This does have implications for the St. Louis-based teams as well, regardless and aside from the other conversation about owners having a ton of money.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I totally understand the people that are mad about this, going, why should we help them build anything? They're billionaires. Why are we helping fund them or do any of that? I totally understand that argument. And I respect the people that opposed it, because I can totally see where they're coming from, and I can understand their constituents not liking it, because a lot of people don't, especially if you're not a sports fan. You're like, why the hell am I helping a billionaire build a stadium? And, I hate to say this, but the overall response to this, it would probably be more positive if the Chiefs and Royals seemed like, okay, great, Missouri passed that, yeah, we're staying. But that wasn't really the response you got, especially from the Hunt family, who were like, okay, we want to thank Governor Keyhole in the Missouri House and Senate for passing this, and yeah, we'll consider it, but we're going to keep our options open, and we still might go to Kansas.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, I know the Royals had representatives in Jefferson City this past week trying to, be visible. So it does seem like, even though they haven't committed to staying in Kansas City and in Missouri, it does feel like the Royals are probably going to trend that direction. Yes, that may mean moving away from Kauffman Stadium, moving downtown or what have you, but it does feel like that is pushing that direction. But yeah, you're 100% correct. I mean, the Chiefs ownership has never given any indication that they're like, yeah, you do this and we're staying. It's cool, awesome. We're basically putting this state against this state to see how much money we can save, and we're going to go where the best deal is. And that's interesting, because you see how much investment in the Kansas City area has been done by a lot of their players. I mean, obviously Patrick Mahomes, especially, just the investment that he's made in that area, to sit there and then be like, we're going to move this thing over to the state of Kansas. You can keep all your little toys over here in Kansas City, Patrick, but you're going to be playing over in one of the most boring states to drive through ever.
Yeah. And the Chiefs are going to do exactly what you said. They're going to use this and turn this into a bidding war and go back to Kansas and say, okay, here's what Missouri said. Now, what can you give us? And then they're going to try to come back to Missouri and say, okay, well, we liked what you did here, but you need to sweeten the pot, and it might get really ugly before this is over with, because, they are going to try to get every penny out of whichever state will give them the most. And, it goes back again to the fact that the NFL is all about the almighty dollar and really doesn't have any loyalty to players or city or fans or any of those things. When it is kind of a shame, because the Chiefs are, such a huge part of the identity of Kansas City. Mm-hmm. That's Arrowhead's such an iconic stadium. To even think about them not playing there anymore is just kind of a shame, because I mean, that's one of the legendary stadiums in the NFL. It's one of the loudest stadiums in the NFL, and to try to move it, to move away from it, it's just kind of shows that there's no real loyalty there at all. So, but again, hopefully you can figure it out, and we can keep them in Missouri without having to give away everything. We don't want to end up having to pay 100% of the new Chiefs stadium to keep them in Missouri.
Yeah, I don't think that's happening, but
No, I
you
don't
make
either.
yeah, you make a great point though about just the venue itself, and I think you look at this and you go, this could be if both teams stay here, this could be perfect scenario to make Kansas City a destination spot because if the Royals stay and they move downtown, they are now separate wholly from the Chiefs Royals kind of combo. So now you've got your own area. And yes, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get down there and all of that, and you have to change the mindsets of people, and you're not going to have those amazing double headers, playoff baseball game and an NFL football game on a Sunday kind of thing like you've had with when the Royals and Chiefs were both playing on the same day. But it does give you that ability to recreate kind of your fan base and your experience for Royals fans. And then on the flip side, you can turn Arrowhead into even more of a destination because of all the things that have kind of been floated out as plans for that area if the Royals were to leave the complex, the experience, the Chiefs Hall of Fame stuff. Like you can really and you've seen how rabid Chiefs fans are, even when they weren't playing well. Chiefs fans still showed up and made that place a living hell to play in. You add in all of these unique experiences that make you prouder to be a Chiefs fan. Like you can print money over there because people are still going to come out. You're going to make it, and Lambeau's a different story, but it kind of makes it another Midwestern Lambeau, a destination for football fans, regardless if you're a Chiefs fan or not, because it's going to be Lambeau, it's going to be Arrowhead, and I hate to say it, it's going to be Dallas. You have to go to these places and experience it. And I feel like if they stay and the Royals move and you can build up around it, you make it that kind of mecca of football fandom. That's where you're going to go if you want to watch a game.
Yeah, you would hope so. Again, you hope that the Chiefs stay. It's such a huge part of the identity and what drives Chiefs fans. And if the Chiefs move to Kansas, how many Missouri fans then go, you know what? I'm not driving across the state to go watch them. You abandoned us and went across the street to go to Kansas. We tried to keep you. You said no. We're not going to support you. That'll be a really interesting thing to watch too, to see what would happen if they do leave, if they lose some of that support. They're going to lose it in St. Louis because St. Louis fans are going to go, oh, you're going to do the same thing Kroenke did. Yeah, you try to shove the Chiefs down our throat by putting them on Fox every week or CBS every week, but they're not in Missouri anymore. Yeah, we're not paying attention. I think you have to look at that if you're the Chiefs ownership too and say, okay, do we alienate a huge chunk of our fan base that we've worked really hard to build, especially on the eastern side of Missouri, because the Chiefs have done everything they can to try to make St. Louis part of Chiefs Kingdom over the last few years. If you move to Kansas, you're going to alienate those fans, and yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how that all plays out.
Yeah, and anybody that is on the western side or is a Chiefs fan or a Royals fan, we want to hear what your thoughts are on this because obviously being on the eastern side of the state, we're not as heavily ingrained in the atmosphere, the conversations, those things that are going on out there. What is your response? Are you happy that the bill passed? Are you worried that both teams are going to leave? If one or both teams leave, will you still be fans? Will you still spend money to support those teams, even though they're going across the state line? And even if it's just across the state line, is that enough to kind of kill your fandom for those franchises? I mean, we want to know because it is a very unique situation, and we've been through it with the Rams to an extent. What is it for you going through it, especially with the Chiefs being a winning franchise as of late? It's not like the Rams, when they left, they were an absolute dumpster fire. The Chiefs are a prominent winning Super Bowl caliber franchise, and they're potentially leaving your area. What in your mind would make you still support them if they were to move?
Yeah. It'll be really interesting to see what the fan base's response is to all of that.
Yeah, it certainly would. And it kind of leads into another question about this. And again, we don't know the answers to this because it's all kind of hypothetical, theoretical at this point in time. But with this, it's kind of a twofold question, because now that this bill is passed and up to 50% can be, doled out in incentives for a team to build a stadium, how likely is it that this entices an owner to bring or try to bring an NFL team to St. Louis? But at the same time, that's if the Chiefs and Royals stay. Is there a separate answer if the Chiefs leave Kansas City? Does it make it more or less likely then that an owner would try to take that spurned fan base on both sides and try to bring a team to the St. Louis area?
I don't know if that would increase the odds of a team moving to St. Louis. I think the bill potentially does at some point. Does a team like, and I know we've talked about not wanting to have another team move to St. Louis, but a team like the Bengals who are fighting in Cincinnati, if they see that, does that make and St. Louis has been linked to the Bengals a couple of times in the last few months. Does that make a team like the Bengals? Does the Brown family go, we could go to St. Louis and they would help us build a new stadium, and we could build it right underneath the arch on the riverfront like the plans were for the Rams to build their new stadium right there on the river with the arch in the background, and they're going to pay a good chunk of it to help us do it. And we know that the Brown family is kind of cheap in a lot of ways. That might be enticing to them. They might be like, "Oh yeah, we want to be the St. Louis Browns," which were Bengals. Wow, Brown. Why do I have the Browns in my mind? The Bengals, because of the Brown family. But would the Bengals be interested in that, and would St. Louis be okay with that? Would St. Louis say, if the Bengals or another franchise, say the Jets at some point, decided that they didn't want to share New York with the Giants anymore, that they didn't want to play second fiddle to the Giants, that they wanted to move, would St. Louis be willing to accept a team like that if you knew that they were going to come in and get a brand new stadium and try to start things all over again? Would St. Louis accept that, or does it have to be somebody going, okay, they'll help us build a new stadium, maybe we will go out and try to get an expansion team? Maybe that entices an ownership group to decide that, yeah, we can go try to get that expansion franchise, because if we get those kind of benefits from the state to help build a new stadium that cuts down on the cost, it saves us, it makes it more worth it. So, I mean, potentially down the road, yeah, maybe it does help bring an NFL team back to St. Louis.
Yeah, it's interesting because we're sitting here talking about a team leaving the area, and the mindset of, do we get another team, is, well, maybe another one can move here from another city. So we're pissing off fans in Missouri just to piss off fans in Cincinnati by taking their team. It's interesting because that's kind of how it's changed as of late. I mean, it used to be, it was expansion teams, and the only guy that really moved his team was Al Davis, because he moved him from Oakland to LA and all over the place. So like he was like the only one that moved it. And yes, the Rams moved out here as well. But now it seems like it is a lot more prevalent for a franchise to be like, you don't want to give us the deal that we're looking for to build a stadium here, I will find a city or a state that will, and I'm moving my team. It feels like there's more and more of that now, and it's changed the dynamic of fandom in the country, because that fantasy football and just the expansion of availability to watch teams, it almost feels like now you don't have regionally supported teams, and it makes it easier for somebody to move a franchise, because you may be moving to a place that has fans that are going to come support because they grew up watching them back home and now they live somewhere else, and that's where you're going, and you've got the built-in fan base because they can see them on TV every week, and they've got a fantasy football player that plays for them, or a fantasy hockey player or baseball player. Like the fandom has changed a lot, and it feels like it's made it easier and easier for teams to move. And I'm one of those, I think that expansion would be the best thing for St. Louis, just because of the experiences we've had. I'm not going to sit there and say I'm going to be upset if a team moves here and we get another franchise, but I think I'm on the ship of, I want an expansion team, because at least at that point, you may have the ability to keep them around for at least 10 years before they go, maybe we do want to move.
Yeah, I think it would have to be more than 10 years. But here's the thought. Okay, we're talking about teams moving and teams that might be unhappy and go, hey, St. Louis will build us a stadium. Let's say there's a family in Southern California that's playing in Stan Kroenke Stadium, and they're really second fiddle, and they really have no fan base, and the Spanos family is kind of tired of it, and Dean Spanos is getting pretty old at this point. Maybe his kids aren't that interested, so maybe they sell the franchise to an ownership group in St. Louis because, hey, we can get a stadium built with the state helping us, and all of a sudden you have the St. Louis Superchargers.
You know what would be funny, and this has no connection whatsoever. If that were to happen and they rebrand as the Superchargers and the Chiefs leave for Kansas because of supercharged bonds that they have, that would be a really interesting correlation as well.
That's very true. Although, a few years ago, the president thought the Chiefs played in Kansas anyway because he congratulated the great state of Kansas when they won the Super Bowl. So maybe it was foreshadowing, unfortunately.
You know what? They can dictate where things go now, apparently. So maybe they were just predicting the future. Who knows?
You never know.
Yeah. So there. I mean, again, looking at this bill, there's a lot more to it. It's not just a cut and dried kind of thing. There are other aspects that are part of the bill that do have effects on the entire state. And we're hoping here in the next couple of weeks, maybe getting a little bit more insight into that, because I mean, we look at the paperwork and we go, oh, that's that and that's that. But there are so many more intricacies that go into it. Stuff, one thing here could trigger one thing over here. And this person said, voted yes for this because they're going to get this and this. And so there's a lot more to this bill than just what it is on the surface. And that's why we can't answer every single question, because we didn't go through any of that. So as the weeks go on, as this kind of gets settled down and we start to see the decisions by the Chiefs and the Royals as well, because again, June 30th, the end of the month, that's when the deal in Kansas expires. So it will be coming up here very, very quickly on if these teams are going to be sticking around, and then from there what the decisions are. So we've still got time to dig deeper into this and figure out if maybe we can predict what's going to happen, or figure out how it will affect the rest of the state if those two teams move. So definitely make sure that you stick with us, because we will have information very, very soon.
Yeah, hopefully we'll have somebody to help us figure all this out in the next couple of weeks. And it's going to be really interesting to see if that end of June deadline is a hard deadline, or does that, as we get closer, does that get expanded a month or two or three, or, what happens there? I mean, there's so many moving parts to this as to what's going to happen and how things work and where money goes and who does what. And yeah, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we'll have somebody in here that can really kind of break things down and kind of explain how the whole process went, even the voting process to get this thing all approved.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I'll say this. I think this week is the most important week in this, because I feel like if there is going to be an extension of that deadline, it will come this week, because everything kind of passed late last week. So I don't know when Kansas's legislators are back in their buildings, but they're probably going to be back there on Monday. And I would expect some sort of news to come out at some point this week, whether it's an expansion of that deadline, or they say, since it's been passed here, we're going to pull our deal now. I mean, something is going to come out here in this week that will hopefully kind of sharpen the picture just a little bit. May not give us a clear definition, but I think we will hear something this week out of Kansas in regards to this for sure.
That'll be really interesting too, to see what Kansas does. And if they bring their legislature back and then they get an extension or they do something new, will Governor Kehoe then call another special session and make everybody go back to Jump City again while they're trying to enjoy their summer break? Because I know some people that wouldn't be thrilled about that. But yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how this all plays out.
Yeah. I want to enjoy summer break. We've made a decision. Let's go with that and see how things go. So yeah. So again, stick with us as we get more information. We'll be passing it along when we get it. So we want to know just as much as you if we're going to continue to cover the Royals and the Chiefs as the fall goes on. But
Yes,
let's
it's
talk
gonna
a
be
little
like
bit
a
about the
soap
Cardinals.
opera.
Yeah, it's gonna be like a soap opera. Yeah, and we've got plenty of soap opera going on right now with sports in the St. Louis area as well. I mean, the Cardinals are they're struggling right now. Last week we talked about it. We felt like they were getting ready to maybe flip the switch back a little bit. Going a chance to go on the road. Hitting up Milwaukee for 4, giving, at the time they were ahead of Milwaukee in the standings and then, getting swept by the Blue Jays and now losing 3 or 4 to the Brewers. They're not behind Milwaukee in the standings. It was a kind of a tested moment for this Cardinals team. And I thought maybe it was a make or break kind of series for them. It probably isn't. You said that last week. It wasn't a make or break series, but it was a very telling series for the Cardinals, mainly offensively. I mean, the pitching was not bad at all. I mean, they were in every game. It was the offense that really faltered, and you narrowed down on 2 guys that we've had discussions about in the past. Lars Nootbaar and Mason Wynn both have been in just absolute cold streaks right now, and none so more than Nootbaar. He was striking out left and right, and he's well over like 0 for 60 now. I think is something. I think is where he may be at right now in the last handful of weeks. But when the offense was clicking, those were the guys that were setting the table and moving things along. And now that they're not doing that, it just feels like everything has been thrown out of whack and nobody is hitting.
Well, I mean, it does. When your top 2 when the guys, like you said, your table setters, when your top 2 hitters aren't getting on base and getting in scoring position for the middle of your lineup, it makes things really hard, and then throw on top of that Brendan Donovan had the toe issue and he missed 3 of the 4 games in Milwaukee, and the last game against Toronto, that takes a huge bat out of the middle of your lineup, not only a table setter, but also a guy that can bring in some huge RBIs. So you have your top 2 guys struggling, and then Donovan not in the lineup. So then you have to do a juggling act of, okay, who's going to bat lead off? And then you're moving guys around. You're moving Herrera up into the 2nd spot. You're moving Burleson into the 3rd spot. But, while all of those guys aren't hitting, then you look at it and you go, okay, the top of our lineup isn't doing anything. But Wilson Contreras is really hot right now again. Nolan Arenado is looking more and more like Nolan Arenado all the time. Those 2 guys are going. Nolan Gorman all of a sudden is getting playing time, and we're seeing the Nolan Gorman that we expect to see. He even had a bunt hit in the 9th inning today.
Mm-hmm.
Gorman looks 100% better. Victor Scott was really struggling. We saw him get a couple of big hits in this series and kind of get himself back on track a little bit. So, the big key is you've got to figure out a way to get Lars Nootbaar going again, because he is the guy that kind of stirs the drink in a lot of ways, whether it's getting a hit or drawing walks and getting himself on base. We saw how this offense was just crushing people early in the season when he was, getting on base 2 or 3 times a game, every game, and that's gone away over the last 2 or 3 weeks. And it's really hurt you. And then you've had Mason Wynn with his struggles, he got the day off today, although Ollie put him in late in the game, and he came up with 2 key at bats and grounded out one time and then struck out with the tying and go ahead runs on base in the 9th inning today, with a really bad at bat in that 9th inning. If you saw the last swing with strike 3, ball was 6 inches outside, and he just kind of flung the bat at it, just trying to do something, and looked really bad. So you've got to try to get him settled down. You've got to try to get Nootbaar settled down. And, hopefully this team can take off again, because while we talk about the struggles, and you said it, it wasn't like they got blown out other than the 6-0 game on Thursday night when Sonny Gray struggled a little bit, had 1 bad inning basically, which we hadn't seen him do in quite a while. They were in every game. You look at the Toronto series. I mean, let's even go back to the Kansas City series before the Dodgers series. You lost 2 out of 3 to the Royals, but 2 of those games you had leads and your pitching staff just couldn't hold them. Your offense kept coming back, fighting back, and, the pitching staff couldn't shut them down. But you were in all 3 of those games. You take 2 out of 3 from the Dodgers. You get swept by Toronto, but 2 of those games you were down big and you came back. The one game The one game you were down 7-2, I believe, and it ended up being 10-9 as Wilson Contreras hit a 2-run homer in the bottom of the ninth inning. Nolan Arenado would hit a 3-run homer in the eighth inning. You kept fighting. You were in that game, and then all 4 games in Milwaukee. You were in every single one of them. You lost, other than the Thursday night game, like we talked about. You lost 6-0 in that one, but the other 2 games you lose 3-2. And you had the tying run or winning runs on base in both of those games, and couldn't come through with the hit. And the guys that we're talking about struggling. On Friday night, it was Lars Nootbaar that struck out with the tying run on base to end the game. And today it was Mason Wynn who struck out with the tying and winning runs on base. So, you've got to find a way to get those guys going. That ninth inning today was frustrating because Arenado had an unbelievable at bat against the Brewers closer, made him throw 12 pitches, gets a line drive base hit. Then Gorman lays down a bunt, which nobody's expecting, obviously, with his power. You've got him on first and second. Jordan Walker walks up. Not a great at bat for Walker. He strikes out on 3 pitches, and he was looking for that knuckle curveball and got a fastball right down the middle, and it froze him for strike 3. You couldn't advance him. Then you get a wild pitch, and you got runners at second and third, and it's like, man, all you got to do is get a hit here. And Victor Scott couldn't come through there either. You didn't even need a hit, sacrifice fly, a bunt. I might have tried his bunt with Scott there to get that tying run home, but
I was thinking the same thing.
But you didn't do it. He strikes out. Mason Wynn comes out, has a not good looking at bat, and the game's over. But again, you were in the game because Ivan Herrera hits the home run in the 8th inning. The thing you have to say about this team is even though they're struggling and you're a little bit frustrated with them right now, they never stop. They come back, they come back, they come back. There's no quit in this ball club. And at some point, it's going to get straightened out again. Like I said, if you could get a couple of these guys going, you're going to be okay. Last year, I've heard a lot of people going, "Oh man, it's just like last year." They're doing just what they did last year, but it's not like last year because last year it completely fell apart and they were getting blown out every night. They had that good run for Mother's Day until about the middle of June, and then it all fell apart and they couldn't do anything again. This team isn't like that. This team is in every game they lose. There's no quit in this ball club, and there've been a couple of bad breaks. Things haven't gone their way. You look at the last run the Brewers scored today. It was a little roller that Contreras couldn't get out of his glove. That was an infield hit. And then the hit that drove the run home was a ball that was hit so poorly that John King couldn't get to it in time to get the guy out at home. His only play was at first base because the ball went about 30 feet. And we've seen a lot of that in the last week. One of the games against Toronto that Miles Michaelis pitched, and they got 7 or 8 runs off of him, and I think 12 hits. But if you go back and watch the replay of that game, most of them were soft contact. They were little bloopers that fell in between the infield and the outfield, or they were little ground balls that just stayed fair down the line. It wasn't like he was getting hit hard. He just wasn't getting any luck on balls that were put in play. And things like that are going to happen. But I think this team is going to turn it around. I think they're going to get – hopefully Chicago is the White Sox this week will be the place that they can kind of turn things around because you've got Liberatore, you've got Sonny Gray, you've got Eric Fetty going in those 3 games. So hopefully they can go out. Possibly maybe you could sweep the White Sox. I know it's never easy to sweep anybody, and the White Sox are not quite as bad as they were last year. But hopefully you can go into Chicago, have a good series, come home, build some on that momentum. Hopefully you can beat up on Cincinnati a little bit and then get everybody fired up and excited for that Chicago series. Because if you could get on a little bit of a roll and get fans back into it, excited again like they were during the Dodger series, that Cardinals-Cubs series could be pure magic at Busch Stadium. It could be absolutely crazy.
Oh yeah, it very well could be, and there's time to make that change. And I think you're right. There's a different feel for me about this team this year than last year. Last year they just it always just seemed like dejection. Like they would lose a game, like they would lose a close game, and then they'd get blown out the next 2 or 3 because they were like, oh, I can't believe we didn't have that game, and then they just go out and can't play. This year's it is different. Yes, they're still losing games, and they're in a tough stretch right now. But it's to your point, they don't give up. They take the game that they just lost, they compartmentalize it, they put it aside, and they go out and play the next game. And yes, again, they may lose that one, but for the most part, they're close. They got blown out on Thursday, 6-0. That's a blowout in my mind. They got beat. Then it was 3-2, a win, and 3-2. So it's not like they're allowing things to snowball. Yes, the losses are building up right now in the last week and a half, but the mindset is still there that things are going to turn around. And you can't look at a 162 game season and say, yeah, somebody is going to be perfect week in and week out. I mean, we're not the 98 Yankees or the 26, 27 Yankees or anything like that, where you're just so dominant that you're going to win well over 100 games. This is a blue collar team. This is a Whitey Ball-esque type of team. They don't hit a ton of home runs. They use their speed. They play fundamental baseball. You're not going to win 115 games playing that style because you're going to lose games that you feel like you should have won. That's just the way it goes. They had a little bit of a hot streak. They're in a cold one right now, but now you've got divisional games coming up after this White Sox series. It's time for you to prove that you have the wherewithal to be able to win a division because you've got home divisional games against a team you're tied with and a team that's ahead of you. If you can find a way to get right for those, then everything else doesn't really matter because that's just the way it goes. You win the series and eventually you're going to come out on top.
Well, and we talked about this bad streak you've gone in, and again, you look at it and you go, okay, they really struggled. Why did they really struggle? Well, your leadoff hitter's not hitting right now. Your second place hitter is not hitting right now. You lost Brendan Donovan, who's probably your most key hitter for 4 of those games. And then you also lost your right fielder, who right before he got hurt was one of the hottest hitters on the team and got big hit after big hit for a week. So you lose 2 guys for injury, and you have 2 guys cold, and you're still in every game. Now you've gotten the 2 injured guys back. You get your 2 leadoff guys going again, and you should be right back where you were before this all started. Baseball's a funny game. You have winning streaks, you have losing streaks. I mean, just like we talked about, the Brewers are doing the exact same thing that the Cardinals did. The Brewers struggled for a couple of weeks. Now they're hot right now. But, they're going to cool off again. They're not a team that's going to run away with it. Nobody's going to run away with anything in this division. I mean, I keep hearing, the Cubs are for real. The Cubs are for real. But the Cubs had a 3.5-week stretch where they didn't play anybody. So, right. I mean, and they won most of those games. So, we'll see what happens. I'm excited to see what happens when the Cardinals and Cubs play each other and push. I think that's going to be a huge series, and I expect the Cardinals to come out and play with the fire that we saw when they played the Dodgers. I expect that kind of a series, and I can't wait. Honestly, it's going to be a good time.
Well, if you've got the fire from Wilson Contreras like he showed on Saturday, I mean, it's going to happen. I mean, this guy he will say whatever he wants to say. Doesn't care if it's politically correct or even something that children should be able to hear. He will say it, and that's going to get it. That game on Saturday was probably the most fun I've had watching a baseball game in the last couple of years, just because it was back and forth. There was heat, but it wasn't malicious heat. I mean, it was great because it ended up becoming like a brother versus brother kind of battle between the Contreras brothers, but it flew out into the entire team. It was like the Cardinals were one brother, the Brewers were the other brother, and they were just going at it. And it was a fun game to watch. And I think you're going to get that again because, especially that Cards-Cubs rivalry, Contreras was a part of both. So he's going to get them fired up for it. It's going to be a matter on if they can start putting some stuff together. I was looking at it as you were talking for Nootbaar. I was wrong. He wasn't 0 for his last 60. He's only 6 for his last 52. So that's not great. It's a 115. It's a 115 batting average. So that is not good at all. And looking at it, 19, 20, 23 strikeouts in those 52 at bats as well. So he struck out about half the time he's come to the plate in those last 52 appearances. So it has been a struggle. He hasn't had a hit since that Saturday game against the Dodgers that they won 2-1. He was 1 for 4 in that game. He has been hitless in his last 5. And he hasn't played in 3 of the last, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He hasn't played in 3 of the last 5 games as well.
Yeah, they're trying to, give him a mental break, trying to work on things, and hopefully it'll help. Sometimes these things work themselves out. We know he's working hard to try to get it straightened out, and when it does break for him, he'll probably go on another really hot streak. That's just how baseball works. You're really cold for a while, and then you're really hot for a while. It's just how the game works. It's cyclical. citrical, and I can't hardly say words tonight, apparently. So, but yes, he will get back on the horse again, and he will be hot again at some point.
Yeah, and we're seeing, and this was the question that we had coming into the season is, what will we see from Nootbaar if he's able to stay healthy? We've never really seen him play an extended amount of time. And I think you're seeing his first real slump when it comes to consistent playing time. And every player goes through it. It just so happens that it's coinciding with the other guy at the top of the lineup and a couple of guys injured. So not the best time for it to happen. But on the flip side, knock on wood, he has stayed healthy. So he should be able to work his way through it, and you will get back to the Nootbaar of old.
Yep. Like Brad Thompson said today, everybody struggles. The question is, how do you respond to that? How do you come out of it? Keep your head up, keep fighting, and eventually you come out of it. Because if you let it get to you and you start getting down on yourself, you're never going to come out of it. So, that's the big thing is, pitchers have made adjustments and they figured something out. Now, how do you adjust to their adjustment and straighten things out?
Yeah, and no better place to look than at Contreras, who started off this season on a terrible cold streak and now has rebounded. And we've seen that we've got the guy in the dugout that has been able to get this team to buy into philosophy. So what do we see from him, and how do things change? And that starts right in on Tuesday when they're in Chicago for 3 against the White Sox. A very much needed break too, because they had gone, what was it? We talked about a couple weeks ago, 17 straight games without a break. So this is a much needed break as well. This could be the perfect thing for them going into that tough stretch with Cincinnati and the Cubs coming into town after this series.
Yes, and then after this day off, they've got another long stretch going into the All-Star break. So they're playing a lot of baseball right now. So hopefully they can figure things out. And you were talking about Wilson Contreras and him saying whatever he wants. I've seen a couple of places today that his comments in post game yesterday, you can actually buy T-shirts that have those comments on them. So those T-shirts are out there to be purchased if you would like on different sites around St. Louis.
Capitalize when you can. Capitalize when you can. All right, Cardinals are in Chicago on Tuesday. A couple of evening games on Tuesday, Wednesday, and then an afternoon game on Thursday before they come back home for 3 against the Reds and then 4 against the Cubs. Hopefully, they're going to be able to turn things around here with this series. So, long show. We've talked a little bit about everything. Not a whole lot of other stuff going on in some of the other sports. I mean, Blues are kind of in a holding pattern because the Stanley Cup Finals are still going on. Florida holds a 3-2 lead in that one. How about Brad Marchand, man? Is Boston kicking themselves for trading a second pick that doesn't become conditional until next year?
I think they might be, man. He's found the fountain of youth down in Florida, hasn't he?
Very much so. Fountain of youth and the no sales tax thing. I mean, that's a pretty good way of rejuvenating yourself. But yeah, they go for the win. I'm gonna be perfectly honest. I think Edmonton sends it back home for 7. I mean, they came back from 3-0 down last year and forced a game 7. I don't see them going away. The big question mark is who's going to start net for them, and if it's Skinner, does he rebound? Does he take what happened and go, look, I'm going to prove I am the guy here and will my team to victory, or will it just be more Swiss cheese for the Oilers?
And here's the question for you. If Edmonton pushes this to a game 7 and they lose again this year, will Oiler fans be able to survive?
I mean, that's tough because last year, I think when it got to game 7, because of the energy exerted in games, 4, 5, and 6 to get to that point, I can't speak for Oilers fans, but I feel like they looked at that and were like, yeah, we pushed a little too fast, a little too late, and just got burnt out and we lost. If they force a game 7 and lose again this year, it stings a whole different way because they were in this series pretty much all the way. And to again come back home twice in games 5, and if it gets to 7 where they lose and have a chance to take control of the series or win the series and they don't, you're going to see a lot of what we saw last night with the Oilers fan ripping off his jersey and having a Florida one underneath. I think you're going to see a lot of vitriol going the Oilers' way. And if I were Connor McDavid or Leon Draisaitl, I would be finding the quickest way to get out of there that I could. And that's not to say that they don't enjoy playing up there, but they're not getting the support on the defensive side and goaltending side that they deserve. And they need to be able to play in a spot that appreciates what they bring to a team and a franchise that will make it so that they have the support to go out there and play their game without having to worry about scoring 6-7 goals a night.
That was going to be my next question. If they lose and you're the Oilers brass, do you look at it and go, okay, we've had McDavid and Draisaitl together. We've gotten to the Stanley Cup Finals 2 years in a row. We've gotten to Game 7 2 years in a row, but we haven't gotten over the hump. Do we have to move one of them to bring in assets to shore up the rest of this team to make them a Stanley Cup championship? Or is breaking that up the end of your run at a Stanley Cup championship?
Oh man, that's a tough one. They're missing Zach Hyman. First off, we can't talk about this without mentioning that he was a big reason why they were winning the way that they were winning. I feel like, yeah, if they were to look at moving one of those guys, it would signal the end. Because yeah, you could trade a Leon Draisaitl and get a stud defender and a goalie that you have confidence in. But with what those two, Draisaitl and McDavid, have, even if they're not playing on the same line, just the firepower that they can put out there, that you lose one of those guys and it's a completely different team, because now defensives can key in on one of them, whether it's Draisaitl or McDavid. You're going to key in on one of them and be able to shut them down. So you can't get rid of one of those guys and expect to find your way back into the finals again. But you've got to be a lot smarter with your spending, because they have gone bargain basement hunting for goaltenders for the last 15 years. I mean, it's been a while since you've looked at an Edmonton team and gone, yeah, I would take their goalie in a series. I wouldn't take an Edmonton goaltender from the last probably 15 years for any series to win one.
Yeah. Yeah, they definitely have to improve that. So it'll be interesting to see what they do in the offseason to try to accomplish that. Do they look at what's out there in free agency? Do they make a trade? What do they do there? And I mean, again, a lot of it's going to depend on what happens in the next couple of games of the Stanley Cup Finals.
Yeah, it certainly does. Still a lot of intrigue there, and off seasons have become a lot more interesting in all sports as of late, because lots of pieces moving and lots of things that are going on. So just because a sport is in an off season doesn't mean things aren't interesting. We're looking at you, Aaron Rodgers, and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Those things keep it interesting.
Oh, yeah, and there's going to be a lot to talk about in the NFL with mandatory minicamps starting now and guys holding out, and what's going to happen with some of those things. What happens in Cincinnati with Hendrickson? What happens in Pittsburgh with Watt? What happens in Buffalo with their running back? There's a lot of things that are going to play out in the NFL in the next couple of weeks, and we haven't talked about. Have you watched any of the NBA Finals? Because I've enjoyed them.
I have as well. I've caught a little bit here and there. I have not actually gotten a chance to watch a game, but I said it last week. This NBA Finals is the finals that would bring me back into the fold, just because the games are exciting. You've got a plethora of stars that aren't superstars with that ego, and they're good players too. It's not like it's just trick play basketball. I mean, these are good players, and whoever comes out of it's going to be well deserved and well earned. This would be the one that would bring me back, and I do need to start watching as it gets down to the wire, because you're seeing a bit of a renaissance in basketball.
Yeah, and those are two really young, exciting, talented teams in Indiana and Oklahoma. In Oklahoma City, they started to make their push last year. This is a team that is young and has a ton of talent and could be the team in the NBA for quite a few years if they're able to keep everybody together. So that's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, it really is. And some of these guys they're going to become household names. And I like the fact that they're going to become household names in non-traditional areas. I mean, we know what Indiana was with Larry Bird as the head coach, and that kind of battle with Shaq and those guys back in the day. But to see in Indiana, to see in Oklahoma City, and knock on wood, I hope both of those franchises are able to lock those guys in long term and keep them there to continue to build what they're building down there. It's going to be fun to see that being in non-traditional markets. And let's back up a little bit even more on Indiana. How about the fact that not only do you have what's going on there in the NBA Finals right now, and you've got some stars there, the fact that you also have Caitlin Clark and the Fever doing what they're doing as well. If you want to mark down a spot where things are becoming very, very exciting sports-wise, you have to target Indiana because they've got a lot of things going for them right now. And right now it is just basketball. And we know the Colts lost their owner, a couple weeks back, but that could be the next kind of like hotbed for sports in the Midwest.
Possibly. I mean, there of course is no baseball. There is no basketball and hockey, and basketball is king in Indiana. Obviously, the Hoosier State and everything that goes on there. But yeah, to have the men's team doing what they're doing, to have the women's team doing what they're doing, it's impressive. And we, like you said, they can't get enough basketball in Indiana. And to go back to the Pacers real quick, you brought up Larry Bird and those runs in the '90s. Part of what's fun watching the Pacers right now is seeing Reggie Miller courtside in his jersey every night, going crazy.
It is awesome because we loved to hate Reggie Miller back in the day, and to see him, he still looks like he could go out there and drop 40 if he really wanted to. But again, it is good to see him out there, kind of being the support and being the cheerleader out there. And Halliburton has really kind of taken on that Reggie Miller role there in Indianapolis as well. So it's good to see, and it takes you back to that '90s feel.
Yeah, and if people don't know Reggie Miller was Steph Curry before Steph Curry.
Yes. Yeah, I still go back to that play where he scored, what was it, like 9 points in 30 seconds?
Yep.
Yeah, that was just the most insane. If you haven't seen that, go look that up because that was just magic for the moment. And you don't see that very, very often. And his battles with Spike Lee. I mean, yeah, the 90s
right.
basketball, 90s NBA was amazing.
Yeah, if you don't know what we're talking about, go back and watch videos of Reggie and Spike Lee jawing at each other as Reggie's going up and down the court and Spike going crazy on the sidelines. It was pretty amazing.
That certainly was. It was the best. So that series right now is they got game tomorrow night. So it's in Oklahoma City. It's a 7:30 tip off on ABC. So you look at it and it's a tie series. So the winner of that one has a good, lock on potentially winning it. Are the Thunder able to hold serve at home, or will the Pacers kind of, do what they do and win the alternate? Because the games have alternated. It's been Pacers, Thunder, Pacers, Thunder. So truth be told, it holds that the Pacers are going to win, even though it's a road game. But, it could finally flip the switch here and see the Thunder win a home game.
Yeah, it's been exciting basketball. You can't turn it off because it seems like whichever team has had a lead going into the fourth quarter, the other team's made a wild comeback. And a couple of times we've seen them pull off the win late in the game. So it's really exciting finals to watch for sure.
Yeah, it really, really is. So we will have a champion pretty much by the time we come on next week. The game 7, if necessary, will start at 7:00 Central Time next Sunday. So that'd be something. If it gets to a game 7, we will definitely be tracking that as the show goes on. So yeah, we talked about a lot tonight. We got more in store coming up here in the next couple of weeks as well. So make sure you stick to our socials. You got anything else going on this week? I know you're off until this weekend when the Reds are in town, essentially.
Yeah. No, I'm actually just trying to recoup for the most part and get ready for that series because summer weather is coming. It's supposed to be high 90s by the weekend next weekend when the Reds are in St. Louis. So I am going to do I shouldn't say I don't have anything going on. I am doing American Legion games Tuesday and Wednesday. So yes, I will be doing something weather permitting because they're calling for rain and storms Tuesday and Wednesday. Woo-hoo. But yeah, right. And then, I will be sweating my butt off at Busch Stadium over the weekend, hopefully watching the Cardinals sweep the Reds. How about yourself?
Pretty much got just a basic week coming up. I'll be over at the Centene Community Ice Center tomorrow for the press conference for the new Lindenwood Lions ice hockey coach. They hired Keith Fisher, assistant from Penn State, so they'll be announcing him officially at his press conference tomorrow. So I'll be over there for that. Outside of that, no, it's pretty laid back, easy week. We're getting ready for boys and girls state over at Lindenwood, so that's always a fun time, just seeing the youthful minds coming in, setting up their governments and their little city states and all that. It's very interesting to see how that plays out in this climate right now, and being able to sit in on some of their communications and stuff like that. It is an eye-opening look, and it's good to see that there are still youth involved in trying to get into politics. And I know we don't talk about politics here on the show, but it's good to see that there are people still getting involved at a young age to try and make impacts in the world. And again, I urge you, whichever side of the aisle you sit on, make sure you get involved, because you can't make changes unless you're involved, and you can't complain if you don't find a way to get involved as well.
Very well said. And getting real serious for a second while we're talking about politics. And like you said, we don't do this very often, but with everything that's going on this week, let's try to remember, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, that we're all Americans and we're all entitled to our opinions. And just because somebody doesn't agree with your opinion doesn't mean that you should be able to attack them or make death threats or, do what we saw in Minnesota over the weekend. And somebody decided, because they weren't happy with the Democratic leadership, that it was okay to go ahead and try to, or in some cases, kill people. We're all Americans. We're all the same people. And just because we don't all have the same beliefs, let's try to love each other. Let's not take lives. Politics is a serious thing, but it's not worth taking somebody's life over. I mean, and like I said, I know people that are in politics. I know people that are on the local level. I know people that are in the state level. And, to hear stories and to hear, I've heard taped phone calls that they've received on their voicemails and stuff with people cussing them out and saying things. And they've received death threats. And, you say that and you laugh and you're like, man, who would be crazy enough to make a death threat? That's crazy. And then you see what happened in Minnesota, and we saw what happened to our president earlier this year. People take this way too seriously. I mean, part of what makes this country great is you're supposed to be able to have your own opinion and voice things. And we've gotten to the point now where nobody thinks that you can have a different opinion than yours. And if you don't agree with him, it's okay to kill him. And it's not. And we just need to realize that we're all Americans, and this is one great free country. That's what made it the greatest country in the world. And in saying that, thank you to the men and women of the Army as they celebrated their 250th birthday yesterday. Thank you for all your service. And I'm going to stop my rant now. Everybody have a good weekend, and let's end this on a happy note.
Yes. Love each other, respect each other, just be good humans. That's really what it comes down to. Be a good human, and everything will be okay. We will get through whatever we're going through, because we have in the past and we will in the future. So I echo Scott's words that we just need to be better humans, and everything will work out okay. So everybody smile, enjoy yourselves, and get ready for a wild week of weather and a wild week of sports here in the St. Louis area. Make sure you come back next week for another episode of Toasted Tavern. We will be breaking down everything that is going on in the world of sports. And who knows, we may have a guest pop up here and there, and you may see some faces that you go, wait a second, I know who that person is. Didn't think to get them on the show, but hey, we might do that. So make sure you stick to our socials for all of those announcements. And again, come back next week for another episode of Toasted Tavern. For Scott Tobin, I am Michael Wagon Connect saying so long. Have a great week. We'll see you next week.